Hey everybody, Keith Ellison here, State of Minnesota Attorney General, and I just want to welcome you all to another edition of Affording Your Life. The fact is that we got some questions. And we're going to answer some questions today that you've posed to us, and we're going to do it in a way that helps you have information to go back and use for your life. Ready?
Question 1. How do we stop Trump? Can his damage be undone?
How do we stop Trump and can his damage be undone? Well, absolutely, we can uphold the rule of law. We can take him to court. We can go out into the streets and we can lift up our voices. We can help people understand that the rule of law in America is precious, that the government actually has a wide range of things that it does to help Americans afford their lives, well, whether it's clean water or Meals on Wheels, or whether it's the PEPFAR program, or whether it's our farm and agricultural communities. There's a wide range of things that the government does to help people afford their lives. And when the president operates outside the law and issues executive orders that are illegal and conflict with the law and the Constitution, we can go to court and we can stop them. But I'm gonna tell you, friends, it's not all about the courts. It's not all about a court of law. It's also about the court of public opinion. We need you to go out and to connect with neighbors, to tell them what the attorneys general are doing, and to tell them what you're doing, to tell them about the thing that you went to that's helping people understand a little bit more about how we can protect our core democratic institutions that help people afford their lives every day. How do we protect our democracy from what the federal government is doing? Can the damage be undone? The answer is absolutely. Nobody can do everything, but everybody can do something, and we need you to figure out where you can fit in.
Question 2. What happens if Elon Musk and DOGE get access to the FDIC? How do we protect ourselves?
So one caller wants to know, what if Elon Musk and DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, gets their mitts, gets their hooks into the FDIC? Then what? What do we do? How can we protect the FDIC? Well, the first question is, what is the FDIC? It is the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. It's an important organization established in 1933. And those of you who've studied that history know that the Great Depression starts in 1929, October, and stock market plummets. There's a run on the banks, and everybody's trying to get their money out of the banks. And some of the banks cannot meet the needs of their depositors. Why? Because you should know, and I'll tell you, banks don't keep your money sitting in a vault. They take the money you deposit with them and they loan it out to people who want to get a home loan, a student loan, they want to start a business. They loan that money out. So banks don't always have all the money that people deposit with them. That money is being put to work. So what is the FDIC? Back before the FDIC, if there was a run on the bank, meaning everybody wanted their money back at the same time and the bank didn't have it, the FDIC insures deposits and makes sure that if you put your money in the bank, I think nowadays up to about $250,000 is protected if you have that in your bank account. And that means the government will cover you for that. That's what the FDIC is. The FDIC deals with banks, some of whom are failing, some of whom are kind of in trouble. Make sure that they meet the benchmarks for solvency. What is solvency? They're making money, they're in the black, and they got enough money to do what they have to do. And so the FDIC makes sure banks are operating well so they don't get into trouble. And then when they don't, they insure depositors. And then the other thing they do is sometimes sell or supervise the sale of banks as they get bought up by other creditors. So the question is, what if the Department of Government Efficiency, Elon Musk, gets into the FDIC? They'll be able to know everybody's deposits. They'll be able to dig into information about how the banks are doing. Maybe they'll use that information to try to market to people, or maybe they'll use that information to try to use artificial intelligence to figure out more ways to sell you stuff. They'll have your data and they'll know all about every bank in America and how they're doing, and they might therefore know about all their depositors and all their loans and all their investments. That it would be an invasion of privacy that is terrible. I want to let you know that this is a very serious matter, that AGs around the country are thinking about this problem, and that we are concerned about it. If you feel like you know something about this, my hope is that you'll give us a call, but that's what we would do. We share your concern about what DOGE might do to the information that it would acquire if it were to get its mitts into the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. It's a serious issue, and we're going to make sure that it does not get gutted and dismantled, because it plays such a vital role in our economy. Think about this. Yes, absolutely, the FDIC protects your deposits, which you need to retire, to protect your savings, but it also makes sure that banks can lend out money to help other people in the economy who want to do things that are good for the economy, like start new businesses, help farmers, get the crop out, buy new plant and equipment, things like that. And those funds are depositors' funds that those banks loan out. What if the FDIC didn't exist? It would mean that the depositors wouldn't want to put their money in banks. Maybe people would put their money in a mattress or something where it would lose, you wouldn't get anything for it. And then the money wouldn't be there for other people, other entities in the economy that need that capital that banks can provide. It would shut down the economy. So it would be a very serious problem, but we're not going to let it happen.
Question 3. What does it take to file a lawsuit against the president and his administration?
So, I go to community meetings all the time, and we've gone to community meetings in Rochester, Moorhead, Morris, Minnesota. We've been to Duluth, we've been to central Minnesota, we've been all over, and people often ask, what does it take to be able to file a lawsuit? Well, you can't just file a lawsuit against somebody just because you don't like what they're doing. What there has to be is some evidence, some facts, which show that they violated an existing law, right? And so you need a law, and you need their behavior to cross the line to violate that law. But then you need even more than that. You've got to show that the state of Minnesota, who I represent, has a concrete injury to the state. So a loss of tax revenue, some sort of harm to the state, which would justify the state of Minnesota having what's known as standing. Now, standing is an issue that you have a concrete injury that, number one, that's redressable. What is redressable? Meaning that if you file this lawsuit, can you at least get relief and can you get back what it is that you lost? If you do file that lawsuit, you need a concrete injury, and it could be also an imminent injury. It doesn't always have to be an injury that you've already suffered. You don't have to wait until they already damaged you. If they said they're going to damage you, they're about to damage you, they have the means, motive, and opportunity to damage you, you might be able to establish standing based on that. So this is what standing is. And so when we go to these community meetings and people stand up and say, I'm a government worker who has been unfairly fired. I'm a farmer who's been injured by these tariffs or been injured by the gutting of the USAID or something else. Or you say, well, I'm a VA worker who has been summarily fired. These things can help us establish standing. So it's important to stay in touch with community so that people can come and say, here's my story, because that might be what we use to establish standing in order to get not just compensation, but some real justice for people in the state of Minnesota. So that's what it takes. I'll also let you know this. There's other elements to a lawsuit. So you have the plaintiff, that's the person who was injured. You have the defendant, that's the person who allegedly did it. In this case, it's the federal government. And then what you have is sometimes an emergency situation. So sometimes the court says, look, you file your lawsuit, the judge will set up a period of time where people can exchange information, a time when you can ask the court to dismiss the other side's lawsuit, and then there's a trial if there's still a factual issue that needs to be determined by a jury. But sometimes the judge will allow the plaintiff to ask for immediate help because the injury that they're suffering is imminent and immediate, and that is called a temporary restraining order, or also known as a TRO. Then later on, you can get that TRO if you can establish certain things, which I'll mention, but then you have to come back to court to sustain that to get a preliminary injunction. And if you go to trial and you win, then you can get a permanent injunction. So what do you need to get a TRO? You got to show irreparable harm. You got to show irreparable harm, that if the court does not give you immediate help to stop the defendant from what they're doing now, then you may never be able to recover and your harm, and what they call irreparable, unrepairable harm. You've got to establish that it's redressable, that if the court gave you the relief you're looking for, that it would be fixed. And then you've got to show that you're likely to win on the merits, that your case is pretty solid from the beginning, and that it's very likely that you can win, or likely that you're going to win on the merits. What are the merits? Well, what the whole thing's about, right? And so that is something that is often going on now, that when we file these lawsuits, we establish standing. The conflict is ripe, meaning it's like something's happening now that matters. You can file that lawsuit, and maybe even you can get emergency injunctive relief because the harm is irreparable. You're likely to succeed on the merits, and what you're seeking is redressable. So these are things that we fight over all the time, and that's really what these lawsuits are all about. It's not that complicated, and I'm glad that we can explain it to people so they'll kind of know what we're doing and why. Let me just tell you, Minnesotans can be very helpful if they feel that they've suffered a concrete injury and they work for the state. They might be able to help us establish standing for the state. They might be able to help us establish standing by bringing forth facts and information in terms of what happened to them, and that we might put into a statement called a declaration that we can use to establish standing. Now, it's true, we have to show that the state of Minnesota has been injured, and an injury to an individual in the state isn't necessarily an injury to the state. But don't worry, let us worry about that. We want you to call, if you feel that the actions of the federal government have hurt you, we want you to call us and let us know about it, because it might help us establish standing. And the number is 651-296-3353. Or you can go online at ag.state.mn.us.
Question 4. Can RFK Jr. establish an autism registry?
A lot of people have been asking me, can RFK Jr. set up an autism registry? They've been saying they want to do an autism registry, and is that actionable, and what can the state do about it? Well, let me tell you, there's a long, ugly history of people setting up registries and using it to the disadvantage of citizens. So anytime the government wants to compile lists of individuals based on their illness, based on their race, based on their sex, based on their whatever, based on their condition that they might have, I think it makes everybody a little nervous, right? Also, we know that RFK Jr. has expressed doubt and hostility about vaccines. He said things about vaccines that aren't true, like they cause autism. That is not true. And so, the issue kind of raises concerns from people, which are legitimate. Let me just tell you this. There are laws prohibiting the government or anyone from messing with your medical data. One is called HIPAA, the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. And HIPAA basically establishes federal standards for protecting sensitive patient and health information. And the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, which RFK runs, issued the HIPAA privacy rule years ago to implement the HIPAA requirements. And so the rule aims to ensure that patient health information is not disclosed without their consent. And so now he's talking about this registry. And so questions abound. What information is it consensual? And what are you going to do with it? And are you going to sell it? And who else will have access to it? These are all legitimate questions. Let me just tell you this. If RFK Jr. tries to set up a autism registry and there are violations of the law as he does it, we will defend Minnesotans without a doubt. And I really wonder, because, shouldn't RFK Jr. be trying to figure out how to get a handle on measles right now? Shouldn't he be trying to do other stuff to help keep Americans healthy? That was what he said he was going to do. Since he's become Secretary of Health and Human Services, we've seen measles outbreaks, other illness outbreaks. He's exposed. He's cast doubt on the efficacy and the effectiveness of fluoride and water, even though we know it's helped people over the course of years and time. He's just coming up with a lot of these cockamamie ideas, and he's not really doing any of the things he kind of promised to do, which is to make Americans healthy again. And so I'm really concerned about it, and we're going to keep a close eye on it.
Question 5. How can Minnesotans protect themselves from scams?
A lot of people want to know, how can we protect Minnesotans' economic life against folks who want to take advantage of them? And sometimes they're big, giant corporations, and sometimes they're little fly-by-night scammers. And Minnesotans need protection from all of those things. I like to categorize them in 3 buckets: skim, scam, and scum. Skim is where you have a good company that provides services and goods that people need, but they kind of add little tips here and there. Imagine a company that says, hey, you can have my cable service at $49.99. Then when you get the bill back, it's like $89.99. You're like, well, where did all this extra stuff come from? And they got a It's Tuesday fee on you, and it's like I Like Money fee, that's extra $10, and it's a connection fee. What is that? And it's all this kind of stuff that they just tack on, and it's really just them, just skimming. And as the AG's office, it's our job to make sure that there's transparency in pricing, there's honesty in pricing, so that you know what you're paying for and what you're getting and how much it's going to be. So that's skim. We take companies to court for that, or we get involved in negotiations with them. And again, these are companies that we don't want to shut down, that are providing a good service, but they just sort of do stuff that eats away at your family budget in an unfair way. Then there's scam. There are businesses out there, folks, whose business model is to take advantage of you. I'll just say, in my opinion, it's payday loans, title loans on cars, rent-to-own furniture. There are different companies that are out there that specialize in areas that really take advantage of the poor and the economically stressed. A lot of check cashing places charge you a lot of money just to get your own money back. And these businesses got to be watched. They're not illegal. We can't shut them down because they exist. But if they are not honest, transparent, and fair with you, or if they take your money in an illegal way, we can hold them accountable for that, and we will. Then there's scum. These are just criminals. And this is stuff like grandparent scams, romance scams, computer scams, people saying, oh, call now or your Social Security is going to be cut off, or stuff like this. Say, oh, you pay a toll, you get an email or a text saying that you didn't pay a toll or something like that. It doesn't work that way. Call us if you get one of these and you're not sure what to do. These are just crooks who might send out a gazillion texts and hope to catch a few people and get the money. And by the time we figure out who it is and where they are, they're gone. And they just operate with multiple shells. But we've got to keep the economy honest and fair for consumers, to be sure, but also for businesses that are what I call high road businesses. There's a lot of businesses out there that treat their workers right, treat the environment right, play fair in the marketplace, and we don't want them to have to compete with crooked businesses. So one of the things that we do is we make it so that there's a level playing field. I was really honored one time because the Solar Panel Association gave us a award because we sued a solar company. Now you might think, well, why would they do that? because this was a crooked solar company that was hurting the reputation of the entire industry. So we want to help consumers, we want to help workers, we want to help the environment, we want to help fair competition, but we also want to make sure that our good businesses are not competing with people who don't play by the rules. And so this is what we're doing. This is the mission. We believe that most corporations are honest and want to do the right thing, but some are not, and certain industries are problematic. We want to make sure people get treated well in the healthcare industry. We're particularly concerned about how that works. We have processes set up to stop wage theft, to make sure workers get all of the wages that they're due. We want to make sure that we're taking like pharmaceutical industry seriously, because we know that in the United States, we pay the most for healthcare, but we are nowhere close to the best outcomes. There are countries that pay less than half of what we pay per person, but get way better health outcomes than we do. Why is that? Because our healthcare system is really more of a sick care system than a healthcare system, and that needs to change. But in the meantime, we're gonna stand up for consumers, and whether they're tenants, which is a consumer, we do landlord-tenant stuff, or in the healthcare system, or just in the economy in general.
Question 6. Why is the state of Minnesota suing the federal government to protect trans kids?
Well, some people have asked me, why is the federal government bullying trans kids, and why is the state of Minnesota suing the federal government? Because the federal government is threatening to punish Minnesota because our law says that we're going to treat all kids equally. Well, the bottom line is that we're suing the federal government because they're threatening to sue us. They said so in letters, they said so in statements, and I'm not going to sit around and wait for them to sue us. We think we're right on the law. We've looked at Title IX, we've looked at the Minnesota State Human Rights Act, and we believe that it is perfectly legal for kids to participate in sports in the area that they identify: male, female, boys, girls sports. And let me just tell you a little story. I know a kid whose name I'm not going to say because, quite honestly, some bullies will attack this kid if I mention her name. But there's a child in the state of Minnesota who is trans. She identifies as female, always has, 11 years old, and always has. Her mom wasn't really sure what to do when she first started presenting as a girl. And what her mom realized is that her daughter was a girl, and every way that, and emotionally, psychologically, every way like that, and that to try to fight that was only going to cause harm to her child. So she went along with it. Now her child is not the best kid on the softball team, not the worst, but she wanted to play. Why? Because she wants to run, she wants to jump, she wants to be on a team, she wants to wear the uniform of her teammates and be part of the gang. And I just can't see how it's good to say that kid can't play, that she's excluded. You say, well, why doesn't she play on the boys' team? Because she's not a boy. She doesn't see herself as a boy. She doesn't identify as a boy. She doesn't relate to the world as a boy. And she feels out of place there. And she feels comfortable and she feels like herself playing on the girls' team. And really, as far as we can tell, it hasn't hurt anybody. We haven't received any complaints. So I'm wondering, what good does it do anybody to tell her once again that she's in the out crowd, that she's not a part of anything? And I just want to remind everybody, trans people are a tiny percent of our population. 70% of Americans say they've never even met a trans person. Trans people, however, have higher rates of being victims of crime, assault, even murder. Trans people report higher rates of anxiety and depression because of the prejudice that they encounter in the world. They have higher rates of suicide, particularly young people. And so if it's going to make this kid feel a little bit more like an ordinary kid to be on that softball team, I can't see how it's hurting anyone. And the law says that they have a right to be on that team. So that's how it is. Public opinion does matter when it comes to everything that I do. I'm a public servant. But there are certain things in our Constitution known as individual rights. The First Amendment says that you can have an opinion that no one else has, but you have the right to have that opinion. The First Amendment says that you have a right to assemble and redress with other people who you want to assemble with, or to redress grievances, or to be in a religion that maybe is a very small group of people. It's called individual rights. And our Constitution protects the individual from everybody else. It allows you to be you. It's the very essence of freedom. As a matter of fact, you don't really need a constitution to protect majority rights. They got the power, they're the majority. But you do need individual rights for people who want to be that individual. And in America, we don't take individual human rights and put them up for public approval. We say, this is your right, you have it. What would it mean if, for example, we had a public opinion poll on whether you have a right to get a lawyer if you're accused of a crime? Some people might say, well, I think that person's guilty because what I read in the paper, so I don't want them to have a lawyer. I don't want them to have a fair trial. That would be against the Constitution. Every individual has a right to counsel and a right to a fair trial and a right to cross-examine witnesses. We're saying that in America, people have due process rights that are individual to them, and no matter what the majority thinks, they still get those rights. And this is something we've agreed on since the beginning of this country and up until this moment. And I think that due process and individual rights is a really good idea, and I think we should stick with it, and I'm gonna stick with it.
Question 7. Which do you prefer, Motown or the Minneapolis Sound?
I have lived in Minnesota longer than I lived in the place that I was born, Detroit, Michigan. And so people will ask me from time to time, Lions or Vikings, Pistons or Timberwolves, Motown or the Minneapolis Sound. And I just have to be honest with all of my loved ones. I'm a Minnesota guy. I'm for the Vikings, I'm for the Timberwolves, and I'm absolutely for Prince and the Minneapolis Sound. Now, don't get me wrong, I'll snap my fingers when the Motown sound starts going, but in my heart of hearts, I derive great pleasure and pride when I hear those great Minneapolis tunes. And but I haven't forgotten my roots, and I still appreciate Motown. But if you ask me which one I prefer, I'm all for the Purple Rain, folks. This has been another edition of Affording Your Life with Keith Ellison. I want to thank all y'all for listening, and thank you for sending your questions in so that we can answer those things that are on your mind. Let me just say as I close, American democracy is something that most of us have lived with all of our lives. The United States is the oldest democracy in the world, the oldest constitution that has not been flipped and turned over for a new one in the world. We're not the biggest democracy, but we are the oldest. And the truth is that it might lead us to believe that it's just always going to be here. But American democracy, friends, is fragile. And a leader who's charismatic, who is able to tap into people's fears and things like that, can manipulate us away from our core values. But we need to remember our core values: due process of law, the rule of law, not just a person making it up as they issue executive orders day after day. Things like the freedom of expression, freedom to be who you are, freedom to love who you will, freedom to not have your race, color, or sex held against you. These are core values that I believe we really need to adhere to. This is a good time to go back to first principles of our democracy and just remind ourselves that this is a fragile democracy we live in. It's a representative democracy, but it's a democracy. And it holds up because of certain pillars, like a free press, like a university system that is allowed to think freely and have academic freedom where people can really say how they feel. It exists because we have a strong educational system, a strong system of public education. It exists because we have the right to counsel and that lawyers can represent you if they want to and are not going to be punished by the government if they represent people the government doesn't like. And so I just ask everybody to go back to these core ideas, understand that these are the pillars, the foundations of American democracy, and they need us now. So thank you very much. See you next time on Affording Your Life.